In a land of golden deserts and bustling markets, where ancient cities rose from the sands and caravans traveled distant trade routes, there lived two brothers who were as different as night and day. The older brother was named Sesame, and he had married a wealthy merchant's daughter, inheriting a prosperous business that made him one of the richest men in the city. He lived in a grand house with servants, fine furniture, expensive carpets, and treasures from across the world. Sesame had everything a person could want materially, but he was never satisfied. He always wanted more, comparing himself to others and feeling envious whenever someone else had something he didn't possess. The younger brother was Ali Baba, a humble woodcutter who lived in a simple house with his kind wife. Every day, Ali Baba would take his 3 donkeys into the forest to gather firewood, which he would then sell in the market for just enough money to feed his family and keep a roof over their heads. He didn't have much, but he was content with his simple life. He found joy in his work, in the changing seasons, in his wife's smile, and in the beauty of the forest where he spent his days. Ali Baba had learned to be grateful for what he had rather than resentful of what he lacked. The two brothers had grown apart over the years. Sesame, proud of his wealth and success, looked down on his poor brother and rarely visited or helped him. Ali Baba bore no grudge about this. He simply accepted that they had chosen different paths in life and that material wealth wasn't everything. He wished his brother well and continued with his humble but honest work. One day, as Ali Baba was deep in the forest cutting wood, he heard the thundering sound of horses approaching. This was unusual because few people traveled through this remote part of the forest. Something about the sound made Ali Baba feel cautious, so he quickly hid himself and his donkeys behind some large rocks, peering out carefully to see who was coming. What he saw made his blood run cold. A large group of rough, dangerous-looking men on horseback came riding into the clearing. Ali Baba counted them carefully. There were exactly 40 men, all armed with swords and daggers, and they were leading horses laden with heavy sacks and chests. These were clearly thieves, bandits who had robbed caravans or raided wealthy homes, and they were bringing their stolen treasure to a hiding place. The leader of these 40 thieves rode to a particular spot where a large rocky cliff face rose from the forest floor. He dismounted and walked directly to the rock, standing before it with authority and confidence. Then he spoke 2 words that would change Ali Baba's life forever. "Open, Sesame." To Ali Baba's absolute amazement, the solid rock face split open, revealing a hidden cave entrance. The 40 thieves led their horses inside, carrying all their treasure with them. The cave was clearly their secret storehouse where they kept the wealth they had stolen over many years. After some time, the thieves emerged from the cave empty-handed, and their leader commanded, "Close, Sesame." The rock sealed itself completely, showing no sign that an opening had ever existed. The 40 thieves mounted their horses and rode away, leaving the forest silent once more. Ali Baba stayed hidden for a long while, making absolutely certain the thieves were gone and weren't coming back. His heart was pounding with excitement and fear. He had discovered something incredible. A secret cave with a magical entrance and, presumably, treasures beyond imagination inside. But he also knew these were dangerous men who would kill anyone who discovered their hiding place. He needed to be very careful and very smart about what he did next. When he was completely sure it was safe, Ali Baba crept out from his hiding place and approached the rock face. Taking a deep breath, he repeated the words he had heard. "Open, Sesame." The rock split open just as it had for the thieves, revealing the dark cave entrance. Ali Baba took a lamp from his donkey's saddlebag, lit it, and cautiously entered the cave. What he saw inside took his breath away. The cave was enormous, much larger than it appeared from the outside, with chambers extending deep into the mountain. And everywhere he looked there were treasures. Piles of gold coins, bags of silver, chests overflowing with precious gems, bolts of fine silk, valuable carpets, beautiful jewelry, and countless other items stolen from caravans and wealthy homes over many years. This was the accumulated wealth of 40 thieves operating over decades, all stored in this one secret place. Ali Baba stood there for a moment, overwhelmed by the sight. He could take all of it if he wanted. He could make himself the richest man in the entire region. But Ali Baba was smart, not greedy. He understood several important things in that moment. First, taking too much would be noticed by the thieves when they returned, and they would hunt down whoever had discovered their cave. Second, suddenly displaying great wealth would raise questions about where it came from, possibly drawing dangerous attention. And third, he didn't actually need vast riches to be happy. He just needed enough to provide security and comfort for his family. So Ali Baba made a careful, measured decision. He took only a few bags of gold coins, enough to improve his family's circumstances significantly, but not so much that it would be obviously missed from the vast treasure in the cave. He loaded the bags onto his donkeys, covering them carefully with firewood so no one would see what he was carrying. Then he left the cave, commanded, "Close, Sesame," and watched the rock seal itself behind him. He went home with his wood and his hidden treasure, his mind already planning how to use this unexpected gift wisely. When Ali Baba arrived home, he told his wife everything that had happened. At first, she could hardly believe it, but when he showed her the gold coins, she was overwhelmed with joy and excitement. She immediately wanted to count all the coins to know exactly how much they had. But Ali Baba, thinking smart as always, stopped her. "We shouldn't count it," he said. "We should simply use what we need, a little at a time, and keep the rest hidden safely. The less attention we draw, the better." But his wife was too excited and curious. "At least let me weigh it," she said, "so we know roughly how much we have." Since they didn't own a scale, she went to Qasim's house to borrow one. Qasim's wife, who was just as greedy and nosy as her husband, was immediately suspicious. Why would poor Ali Baba's wife need to weigh something? What could they possibly have that needed weighing? Her curiosity got the better of her, and she had a clever but sneaky idea. She put a bit of wax on the bottom of the scale before lending it, hoping that whatever was being weighed might stick to it and reveal what Ali Baba's family had suddenly acquired. When Ali Baba's wife returned the scale, Qasim's wife immediately checked the bottom. Stuck in the wax was a single gold coin. She showed it to Qasim, and he became consumed with jealousy and curiosity. How did his poor brother, who cut wood for a living, suddenly have so much gold that he needed to weigh it rather than count it? Qasim went immediately to Ali Baba's house and demanded to know where the gold had come from. Ali Baba, who was honest and perhaps too trusting of his brother, told Qasim everything about the cave and the magic words. He even offered to share the treasure with him, saying there was more than enough for both of them. But Qasim barely heard the offer to share. His greedy mind was already racing ahead, imagining all that treasure and how he could take most of it for himself. He demanded the exact location of the cave and the magic words to open it, and the next morning, he set out with 10 mules to carry back as much treasure as he possibly could. Qasim found the cave easily with Ali Baba's directions. He stood before the rock face and commanded, "Open, Sesame." The cave opened for him and he rushed inside, his eyes gleaming with greed as he saw the vast treasures. Unlike Ali Baba, who had been careful and measured, Qasim was overcome with avarice. He wanted everything. He began frantically loading his mules with the most valuable items he could find, the biggest gems, the heaviest gold, the finest silks. His mind was so consumed with thoughts of wealth and how rich he was about to become that he wasn't thinking clearly about anything else. After loading his mules until they could barely stand under the weight, Qasim went to leave the cave. But when he stood before the sealed entrance, his mind went completely blank. In his excitement and greed, he had forgotten the magic word. He tried everything he could think of. "Open barley," he said. Nothing happened. "Open wheat." Still nothing. "Open corn." The rock remained solid. He tried every grain and seed he could think of, growing more and more panicked, but he simply could not remember Sesame. His greed had so clouded his mind that he couldn't recall the one simple word he needed to escape. Hours passed, and Qasim remained trapped in the cave, growing more desperate and frightened. He was still there, frantically trying different words, when the 40 thieves returned. They immediately noticed that someone had been in their cave and had disturbed their treasure. When they entered and found Sesame, they showed no mercy. These were hard, dangerous men who had killed before to protect their treasure, and they killed Sesame immediately as a warning to anyone else who might discover their secret. When Sesame didn't return home, his wife grew worried and went to Ali Baba, asking if he knew where Sesame might be. Ali Baba, with a sinking feeling in his heart, suspected what had happened. He went to the cave alone, spoke the magic words, and found his brother's body inside, killed by the thieves. Despite their differences and despite Sesame's greed and unkindness, Ali Baba wept for his brother. He carefully brought Sesame's body out of the cave and took it home so his brother could have a proper burial. Ali Baba's household included a remarkably clever servant named Morgiana, a young woman with quick wits and courage to match. When Ali Baba explained what had happened, Morgiana immediately understood the danger they all faced. The thieves would know someone else knew about their cave, and they would be searching for that person. She set about making arrangements for Sesame's burial in a way that wouldn't raise suspicions about how he had died, using her intelligence to protect the family. Meanwhile, the 40 thieves returned to their cave and found Sesame's body gone. Their captain was furious and determined to find out who else knew about their secret cave. He sent one of his men into the city to gather information, asking questions carefully to discover if anyone had recently died under mysterious circumstances. The thief eventually learned about Sesame's death and the house where the funeral had taken place. He marked the door with chalk so the other thieves could find it later. But Morgiana, who was always observant and suspicious, noticed the chalk mark. Her sharp mind immediately understood this was probably the work of the thieves trying to identify their house. Without telling anyone, she took chalk and marked several other doors in the neighborhood in exactly the same way. When the thieves came later that night, they found many marked doors and couldn't tell which was the right house. The captain, realizing they had been outwitted, had the thief who failed killed and sent another to try again. This second thief was more careful. Instead of marking the door with chalk, he studied the house carefully and memorized its exact appearance and location. He reported back to the captain, confident he could lead them to the right place. The captain then devised a plan. He obtained 40 large oil jars, filled 37 with his thieves, each man armed and ready, and filled only 2 jars with actual oil. Disguised as an oil merchant, the captain brought these jars to Ali Baba's house, claiming he was traveling to market early the next morning and needed a place to store his oil overnight. Ali Baba, who was generous and hospitable by nature, agreed to help this apparent merchant and invited him to stay for dinner. The jars were placed in the courtyard, and the captain joined the family for the evening meal. While they ate, the clever Morgiana went to the courtyard to get oil for the kitchen lamp. As she approached the first jar, she heard a whisper from inside. "Is it time?" She realized instantly that these weren't oil jars but hiding places for thieves. Her mind worked quickly. She went to the 2 jars that actually contained oil, heated the oil until it was boiling, and poured it into each of the other jars, killing the thieves hiding inside before they could attack. When the captain checked on his men later that night, he found them all dead and knew that someone in this house was extraordinarily clever and had discovered his plan. Rather than face this unknown but clearly intelligent opponent alone, he fled into the night, leaving behind his dead thieves and his plan in ruins. He vowed revenge but needed time to create a new strategy. The captain eventually established himself in the city as a wealthy merchant, slowly gaining Ali Baba's trust over many weeks. He planned to get close enough to Ali Baba to kill him when the opportunity arose. But Morgiana, who never let down her guard, recognized him despite his disguise. She saw the way he looked at Ali Baba, the hatred barely concealed in his eyes, and she knew this merchant was actually the thief captain come for revenge. At a dinner party Ali Baba hosted for his new merchant friend, Morgiana performed a traditional dance with a dagger as part of the entertainment. As she danced, she moved closer and closer to the disguised captain. Then, in one swift movement, she plunged the dagger into his heart, killing him before he could harm Ali Baba. Everyone was shocked, but when Morgiana revealed who the man really was and showed them the hidden weapon he had been carrying, they realized she had once again saved the entire family with her quick thinking and courage. With all 40 thieves now dead and their secret cave known only to Ali Baba, the treasure became his. But Ali Baba, true to his character, didn't let this wealth corrupt him. He used it wisely and generously. He freed Morgiana from servitude and arranged for her to marry his son, honoring her for the remarkable courage and intelligence she had shown. He helped the poor in his community, supported widows and orphans, and used his wealth to make life better for many people, not just himself. Ali Baba never forgot the lessons his experience had taught him. He had been smart rather than greedy, taking only what he needed from the cave initially, which had saved his life. His brother Qasim had been greedy, trying to take everything, and that greed had literally killed him, first by making him forget the magic word in his excitement, and then by bringing the thieves' vengeance upon him. Morgiana had been smart, using her intelligence and observation to protect the family from dangers that physical strength alone could never have defeated. The 40 thieves had been clever in some ways but ultimately not smart enough, failing to recognize that greed and violence would eventually lead to their downfall. Ali Baba taught these lessons to his children and grandchildren. "Greed blinds you," he would tell them. "My brother had everything he needed, but he wanted more and more, and it cost him his life. When you're greedy, you stop thinking clearly. You make foolish mistakes. You take unnecessary risks. You forget what really matters." He would tap his head and continue. "Being smart means thinking ahead, considering consequences, knowing when enough is enough, and understanding that more isn't always better." He also taught them about Morgiana's example. Intelligence and courage together are more powerful than any treasure. Morgiana saved us not with strength or weapons, but with her quick mind and her bravery in acting on what she observed. She stayed alert, noticed details others missed, and had the courage to do what needed to be done even when it was dangerous. The treasure from the cave lasted for many generations, carefully managed and wisely used. But the real treasure Ali Baba passed down was the wisdom he had gained. His descendants became known not for their wealth but for their intelligence, their generosity, and their understanding that being smart, thinking clearly, acting wisely, and knowing when enough is far more valuable than being greedy, no matter how much gold greed might temporarily bring you. And so the story of Ali Baba and the 40 thieves became a lesson told across the ages, that greed clouds judgment and leads to destruction, while intelligence, wisdom, and knowing when you have enough leads to true and lasting prosperity. The magic words "Open Sesame" became famous, but the real magic was in the wisdom to use opportunities well, to be smart rather than greedy, and to understand that the greatest treasures aren't the ones you can weigh or count but the ones you carry in your character and pass on through your example.